get quite a lot of students who say to me, how do you come up with ideas? So that's partly the motivation for doing this series. And the other is that I think in the church space, one of the biggest challenges is imagination. I think sometimes people think it's resources or whatever, but actually it seems to me that imagination is the thing that we want to work on. When I first started doing stuff post-university, so I suppose I'd have been about 23, something like that, I started work in youth ministry with an organisation called Bath Youth for Christ. And the people running it at the time were Gerard and Chrissy Kelly. And Gerard Kelly was incredibly creative. So if we had a planning meeting and didn't come up with any ideas and we're doing a school assembly the next day or something, he would come up with something and give us the plan in the car, and we'd do it. And a lot of those ideas were quite crazy. So it was a fun environment to be in. But after I'd been there a year, I can't remember how long, maybe a couple of years, he and Chrissy moved on, and then my wife Jenny and I took over running it. And I can remember the first meeting where a new term, a new school year was about to start, and we were in a prayer meeting. And I can remember thinking, who is going to come up with the ideas? Gerard's gone. He was the ideas guy. And I remember in the silence when I was sitting there, just a voice in my head basically said, "You are." and I kind of had this thought, or I felt God speaking to me, I suppose, saying, "I've made you creative." And what happened in that team was we learned to really love creativity. We talked about getting the creative juices going. I loved ideas and came up with all sorts of things. But it was interesting that it was that I needed to hear that you are creative and somehow own that. And that was a significant moment for me. And I'm kind of known for being creative, I think, now. But it's interesting how a lot of us, I think, struggle maybe with that idea.
It's been a long road to actually be able to tick that box on your poll to say, yes, I am creative. When I was growing up, I felt like, especially in school, we were sort of divided into two groups. So you're either sort of, maybe there were three, were sporty, arty, or academic. My parents really encouraged me to pick things that I was going to get high grades in. And I don't know if you got from my little scribbles, but I'm not very artistic. I can't really draw very well. So I really kind of quite early on ditched this idea that I was creative, because I'd kind of bundled being artistic with being creative. And that, I think, was one of my biggest sort of things that I shouldn't have done, to believe that about myself, or to have that belief that they're the same. Sort of, I'm in a real flow, or I'm happiest when I'm creating and making and doing, and looking at art, or reading something beautifully written, or listening to beautiful music. It spans the whole genre of the arts. I enjoy them very much. But I think the big thing that makes me want to own that I am creative is that I feel I can bring ideas, bring like my imagination, I guess, into being. Like I think of something like this paper cut thing that I wanted to do, but I actually then am now learning that I have to do it. I have to just try it and not worry about failure, and not worry about not getting it right or it not being amazing. I just have to make it happen.
For me, kind of landing in the Lake District, it was an obvious place to start. A fresh expression was out in the hills. So we developed Mountain Pilgrims. And then once people kind of started to see that, lots of other ideas started to emerge. So Maranatha came out of somebody whispering to me at the end of a session, "I do Christian yoga, is that okay?" And and my kind of predisposition is not to say no. So and then that really starts just to catalyze the ideas of just saying yes. And whether that's sitting down for a coffee with somebody who says, well, I want to start a youth group for the over 60s like we used to go to in the 1960s. And we go, yeah, that's a great idea. And I think that's a real key thing, and it goes back to that Roger Van Eyck book, A Whack on the Side of the Head, that there's no wrong answer, and that whole play is frivolous thing. Those are some of the early lessons I learned around creativity. But I think as a leader, it was about not saying no, really. I think that was a really key thing.
I've asked Cathers to come up with a problem stroke opportunity related to church, and we're just gonna come up with incredible ideas.
And it's how we as a church or congregation can tackle loneliness in our communities. I'm not talking about tackling loneliness generally overall. It's just very specifically in this time while people can't get out and about and meet new people. So what could we do? How can we solve that problem?
So I'd kick off with chalk, putting chalk through the neighbours' letterboxes and putting questions on the pavement so that when they walk past they can answer the question with the chalk.
Yes, and an idea that I saw being done in our context in Leicester was a hope board for community members to write their hopes for when lockdown ends.
I like that. So maybe we could do a chalk-based treasure hunt around a neighbourhood, and then there could be some hopeful messages in people's front gardens or windows. That is what they go looking for, and then that way they also get to know who in their areas are sort of open to engage with their neighbours. That way,
I'd invite them to put up a balloon if they've done the
if they've done the tour.
Engaging in it.